Have you ever noticed how almost impossible it is to be alone with your own thoughts for more than a few minutes? How the first thing we do when we wake up is grab our phone, turn on the TV, or find any distraction that pulls us away from the silence of our own mind. Martin Heidegger, one of the most profound philosophers of the 20th century, discovered something disturbing about human nature. We spend our entire lives running away from ourselves, and it's not a physical escape. It's something far more subtle and devastating. It's the constant flight from our own authentic existence, from our responsibility to choose who we really are, from the anxiety of recognizing that our life is finite and that every decision truly matters. Heidegger called this living in inauthenticity, and he discovered that most people prefer this escape to facing the reality of their own existence. But why do we run? Why is it so terrifying to simply be ourselves? Why do we prefer to live as everyone expects us to live, do what everyone does, think what everyone thinks, rather than discover who we really are when all the masks fall away? Heidegger spent decades studying this question and reached a conclusion that will completely change how you see your own life. He discovered that we flee from ourselves because our authentic existence confronts us with three terrifying truths that we prefer to avoid at any cost. The first truth is our radical freedom of choice. When you strip away all the roles you play, all the expectations others have of you, all the social scripts you follow automatically, what remains is a terrifying emptiness. Not emptiness as in meaninglessness, but emptiness as in pure possibility. You are not predetermined. You are not fixed. You are not destined to be anything specific. You are, as Heidegger put it, thrown into existence with the burden of having to choose who you become. This freedom is not the comfortable freedom we talk about in political speeches. This is what Heidegger called the anxiety of being. It's the dizzying realization that you could choose to be anyone, do anything, go anywhere, and that every moment you're not choosing, you're still choosing. You're choosing to remain the same, to follow the crowd, to live inauthentically. Most people can't handle this weight of absolute responsibility for their own existence. So they do what Heidegger called falling into das Man, losing themselves in what one does, what people say, what everyone thinks. They become part of the anonymous crowd where individual choice disappears into collective conformity. The second terrifying truth that authentic existence reveals is our absolute aloneness in making the fundamental choices of our lives. Heidegger called this thrownness, the fact that you are thrown into this world without your consent, into circumstances you didn't choose, with a life you must somehow make sense of entirely on your own. No one can live your life for you. No one can make your deepest choices for you. No one can experience your death for you. When you truly grasp this, when you realize that beneath all the social connections and relationships and communities, you are fundamentally alone with your existence, it creates what Heidegger called angst, a profound existential anxiety that goes far deeper than ordinary fear or worry. This is why we constantly seek what he called idle talk, conversations that say nothing, social media that fills the silence, activities that keep us from confronting this essential aloneness. We would rather drown in meaningless chatter than face the profound silence where we must meet ourselves as we truly are. But Heidegger discovered something remarkable about this anxiety. He realized that angst, though uncomfortable, is actually the beginning of authentic existence. It's the signal that you're getting close to something real, something true about your nature that has been hidden beneath layers of social conditioning and automatic behavior. The third truth that authentic existence forces us to confront is our mortality, not just as an abstract concept, but as the defining reality that shapes every moment of our lives. Heidegger called this being toward death, and he argued that most people spend their lives in what he called everyday dying, a kind of psychological death where they avoid thinking about their mortality by losing themselves in routine, distraction, and the illusion that they have unlimited time. When you truly grasp that your life will end, that every day brings you closer to that end, that every choice you make is made in the context of finite time, everything changes. Suddenly, living according to others' expectations seems like a tragic waste. Suddenly, following social conventions that don't align with your authentic self feels like a form of suicide. Suddenly, the question becomes not, what should I do, but how can I live authentically in the time I have? I want to pause here because I know some of you are feeling something intense right now. Maybe it's that familiar sense of unease, that restless feeling that something in your life isn't quite right. Maybe it's the recognition that you've been running from yourself for so long that you've forgotten what you're running toward. If you're feeling this, if there's a part of you that's tired of living inauthentically, tired of being who everyone else expects you to be, I want you to do something courageous right now. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to stop running." Just those 5 words. Because when you acknowledge this, you're not just being honest with yourself. You're giving someone else permission to be honest too. You're showing others who feel this same anxiety that they're not alone in this struggle. So write it down. I'm ready to stop running. Your courage to face this truth might be exactly what someone else needs to see today. This is what makes Heidegger's insight so challenging and so necessary. He showed us that what we call normal life, the endless busyness, the constant entertainment, the automatic following of social expectations, is actually a form of existential cowardice. It's a way of avoiding the fundamental questions that authentic existence demands we ask. Who am I really? What do I truly value? How do I want to live the limited time I have? The first way people flee from themselves, according to Heidegger, is through what he called everydayness. This is the routine, predictable existence where every day looks the same, where you never have to make real choices because you're just following the script that society has written for you. You wake up, check your phone, go to work, come home, watch TV, go to sleep, repeat. There's nothing necessarily wrong with these activities, but when they become a way to avoid deeper questions about your existence, they transform from living into a kind of walking sleep. Heidegger observed that people cling to routine because it provides the illusion of stability and meaning without requiring them to take responsibility for creating that meaning themselves. But this comfort comes at a profound cost. You begin to experience what he called the nothing, a growing sense of emptiness and meaninglessness that no amount of distraction can ultimately fill. The second way people flee from authentic existence is through losing themselves in the they, das Man in German. This is perhaps Heidegger's most important insight into human behavior. He noticed that people escape the burden of individual choice by disappearing into collective identity. Instead of asking, "What do I think?" they ask, "What does everyone think?" Instead of, "What do I value?" they ask, "What should I value?" Instead of, "What kind of life do I want?" they ask, "What kind of life is expected?" They adopt the opinions, values, and lifestyle of their social group, not because these genuinely resonate with their authentic self, but because belonging to the group eliminates the anxiety of having to choose for themselves. This is not just about peer pressure or conformity in the obvious sense. It's much more subtle. It's about the unconscious adoption of ways of thinking and being that allow you to avoid the fundamental question of who you are when stripped of all social roles and expectations. You might think you're making individual choices, but if those choices are predictable based on your demographic, your profession, your political affiliation, or your social circle, then you're likely living in what Heidegger called inauthentic existence. not choosing based on your genuine self, but based on who you think you're supposed to be. The third way people flee from themselves is through what Heidegger called curiosity, but not curiosity in the positive sense we usually think of. He meant the restless seeking of novelty and stimulation that serves as a distraction from deeper self-examination. This is the endless scrolling, the constant need for new experiences, the addiction to information that doesn't transform you, the pursuit of entertainment that leaves you feeling empty. It's curiosity that seeks to avoid rather than discover, that fills time rather than deepens understanding. People caught in this pattern often feel busy and engaged, but beneath the activity is a profound avoidance of stillness, silence, and the self-examination that might emerge if they stopped running long enough to listen to what their authentic self is trying to tell them. The fourth way people escape authentic existence is through what Heidegger called ambiguity. This is the tendency to keep everything vague, unclear, and open to interpretation, so that you never have to commit fully to any particular way of being. You keep your options open, not because you're genuinely exploring possibilities, but because making a definitive choice would require you to take responsibility for who you are and who you're becoming. You speak in generalities, avoid difficult conversations, and maintain relationships and commitments at a surface level that doesn't require you to reveal or develop your authentic self. This ambiguity feels safe because it seems to preserve freedom. But Heidegger realized it actually destroys freedom by preventing you from ever fully engaging with your own existence. But here's what makes Heidegger's philosophy so powerful. He didn't just diagnose the problem of inauthentic existence. He showed that the anxiety we feel when we start to wake up to our inauthenticity is actually the beginning of authentic living. He called this anxiety the call of conscience, not moral conscience, but existential conscience. It's your authentic self calling you back from the lostness of everyday existence, from the comfort of conformity, from the safety of not having to choose who you really are. This call doesn't come as a pleasant invitation. It comes as disruption, as dissatisfaction with things that used to satisfy you, as a growing sense that you're living someone else's life rather than your own. It might feel like depression, restlessness, or a vague but persistent feeling that something essential is missing from your life. But Heidegger discovered that this discomfort is not a problem to be solved. It's a signal to be followed. It's your existence trying to guide you back to authenticity, back to genuine choice, back to owning your life rather than being owned by social expectations and unconscious patterns. The fifth insight Heidegger gained was that authentic existence requires what he called resoluteness, not just making decisions, but owning the fact that you are someone who must make decisions, that your life is the sum of the choices you make, and that you cannot escape this responsibility by losing yourself in the crowd. Resoluteness doesn't mean being stubborn or inflexible. It means being willing to choose who you are and how you live based on your own understanding of what it means to exist authentically, even when this choice makes you different from others, even when it makes you uncomfortable, even when it means accepting the anxiety that comes with genuine freedom. This is perhaps the most difficult aspect of authentic existence, accepting that you are responsible not just for your actions, but for your entire way of being in the world. You are responsible for your values, your relationships, your response to circumstances beyond your control, your attitude toward your own mortality. Most people find this level of responsibility overwhelming, so they flee back into the comfort of letting others, society, family, religion, ideology, make these fundamental choices for them. But Heidegger showed that this flight always fails because you cannot escape your own existence. You can only live it authentically or inauthentically. The sixth thing Heidegger discovered about human flight from authentic existence was that it creates what he called falling, not a single moment of choice, but a continuous process of losing yourself in the everyday world of things, opinions, and activities that keep you from confronting the fundamental questions of your existence. This falling is so subtle that most people don't even realize it's happening. You gradually stop asking deep questions, stop examining your assumptions, stop creating space for solitude and self-reflection. You become increasingly absorbed in what Heidegger called the world of equipment, the tools, technologies, and systems that surround you, until you begin to see yourself as just another piece of equipment in the social machine. You start to evaluate yourself based on productivity, efficiency, usefulness to others, rather than authentic self-expression and genuine engagement with your own existence. You become what Heidegger called das Man, the anonymous one who does what one does, thinks what one thinks, without ever asking whether this aligns with your authentic self. The seventh insight was that people flee from authentic existence because it requires what he called being thrown into thrownness, fully accepting the circumstances of your existence without using them as excuses for inauthenticity. You were thrown into a particular time, place, family, culture, body, and set of circumstances that you didn't choose. Most people spend enormous energy either trying to escape these conditions or using them to justify why they can't live authentically. I would be different if I had different parents, more money, better health, different opportunities. But Heidegger realized that authentic existence begins with fully accepting your thrownness, not as something to overcome or escape, but as the raw material from which you create your authentic self. Your limitations, your circumstances, even your past mistakes become the context within which you choose who to be, not excuses for avoiding that choice. This acceptance is terrifying because it removes the comfortable illusion that you're waiting for better circumstances to begin living authentically. It forces you to recognize that this life, these circumstances, this moment is where authentic existence must begin, if it's going to begin at all. The eighth way people flee from themselves is through what Heidegger called idle talk. Not just meaningless conversation, but any form of communication that serves to avoid genuine encounter with yourself or others. This includes the endless commentary on social media, the rehearsal of opinions you've never really examined, the repetition of phrases and ideas that sound meaningful but don't connect to your actual experience. It's talk that fills silence without creating understanding, that connects you to others without revealing who you authentically are. Heidegger noticed that people become addicted to this kind of communication because it provides the illusion of engagement and connection while actually protecting them from the vulnerability that authentic communication requires. You can talk all day about everything except what really matters: your deepest fears, your authentic desires, your genuine questions about how to live. But when you recognize idle talk for what it is, when you begin to notice how much of your communication serves to avoid rather than reveal truth, you create space for what Heidegger called authentic discourse, communication that emerges from and expresses your genuine self. The ninth thing Heidegger discovered was that authentic existence requires confronting what he called the nothing, not the absence of something, but the recognition that beneath all the roles you play, all the identities you've constructed, all the meanings you've borrowed from others, there is a fundamental openness, a space of pure possibility that is both terrifying and liberating. Most people experience glimpses of this nothing during moments of transition, loss, or quiet reflection, and immediately flee back into busyness, entertainment, or social activity to avoid the anxiety it creates. But Heidegger realized that this nothing is not emptiness in a negative sense. It's the space within which authentic choice becomes possible. When you can sit with this nothing without immediately trying to fill it with distraction or borrowed meaning, you create the conditions within which your authentic self can emerge. This requires tremendous courage because it means being willing to exist in uncertainty, to choose without guarantees, to create meaning rather than consume it. The 10th, and perhaps most profound insight Heidegger gained was that the flight from authentic existence is ultimately a flight from time. Not clock time, but what he called temporal existence. The recognition that you exist within the flow of time, with a past that shapes you, a future that calls you, and a present moment where authentic choice happens. People flee from temporal existence by living either entirely in the past, repeating old patterns, nursing old wounds, defining themselves by what has already happened, or entirely in fantasies about the future, always preparing to live authentically someday when conditions are better. But authentic existence, Heidegger realized, happens in what he called the moment of vision. Those moments when past, present, and future come together in a unified experience of choosing who you are right now, in these circumstances, with this history, facing this uncertain future. These moments of authentic temporality are rare because they require you to fully inhabit your existence without escape routes, without the comfort of thinking you can postpone authentic living until later, or blame your current inauthenticity on the past. And here's where Heidegger's insight becomes truly transformative. He realized that once you've experienced authentic existence, once you've stopped running from yourself and begun to live from your own center rather than from social expectations, you cannot go back to unconscious inauthenticity. Not because it becomes impossible, but because it becomes intolerable. You recognize the profound difference between living your own life and living the life that others expect you to live. You feel the difference in your body, in your energy, in the quality of your relationships, in your capacity for genuine joy and sorrow. This doesn't mean authentic existence is easy or comfortable. In fact, it's often more difficult than inauthentic existence, because it requires you to take responsibility for your choices and their consequences. But it's a difficulty that feels meaningful rather than empty, challenging rather than numbing. Heidegger called this authentic temporality, existing fully in time with complete acceptance of your mortality, complete ownership of your past, and complete commitment to creating an authentic future from the choices you make in each present moment. This is what makes his philosophy so relevant to our current moment. We live in a culture that provides more distractions, more opportunities to lose ourselves in entertainment and busyness, more ways to avoid authentic existence than any culture in human history. But the fundamental human situation remains the same. We are thrown into existence and must choose who we become. The question is whether you will choose consciously, authentically, with full recognition of your freedom and responsibility, or whether you will let others choose for you through social pressure, cultural conditioning, and the comfortable unconsciousness of following the crowd. But it all begins with recognizing that you have been running from yourself, and that this running is not protecting you from anything real. It's protecting you from the magnificent terror and responsibility of being fully alive, fully present, fully yourself in a world that needs your authentic contribution. Heidegger spent his life showing that beneath all our sophisticated distractions and complex social systems, the fundamental human question remains simple. Will you choose to exist authentically, or will you continue to flee from the awesome responsibility of being yourself? The anxiety you feel when you consider this question is not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you're getting close to something profoundly right. It's your authentic existence calling you home to yourself. So the question becomes, are you ready to stop running? Are you ready to face the anxiety of freedom, the loneliness of individual choice, the responsibility of creating meaning rather than consuming it. Are you ready to discover who you are when you stop being who everyone else expects you to be? Because once you stop fleeing from yourself, once you turn toward your own existence with courage and honesty, everything changes. Not because life becomes easier, but because it becomes yours. Not because the answers become clear, but because the questions become authentic. Not because you escape the human condition, but because you finally begin to live it fully. This is both the terror and the gift of Heidegger's insight. The terror of recognizing how much of your life you may have spent running from yourself, but the gift of realizing that it's never too late to stop running, to turn around, and to begin the most important journey of your life, the journey back to who you really are. If this resonates with something you've been feeling, if you recognize yourself in this pattern of fleeing from your own authenticity, then you might be ready for the kind of deep exploration that leads to genuine transformation. I explore these ideas because I know how isolating it can feel to start questioning whether you're living your own life or just following scripts others have written for you. If you're ready to stop running and start living authentically, subscribe for more insights into what it really means to exist fully and consciously in this brief, precious life you've been given.